Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. What I wanted to talk about for this video is the books that I wanted to get when I came back to the hobby. Now I alluded to this topic in a couple of videos, didn't spend too much time with it in some. May have talked about it in detail in others, but for this video I wanted to talk about some of the books that when I came back to the hobby I was really eyeing out for. I really wanted. And here I'm going to show you some of the ones that I bought when I came back. So let me grab them, put them in my lap. So what made me come back to the hobby? Maybe some of you have similar reasons for coming back to this hobby after being away for so long. Honestly, I think one of the answers that I would hear from people in a similar situation, such as myself, would be the movies. The movies brought me back. I saw some of the Xmen movies or the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and I decided, hey, I used to collect comics. I'd like to get back into it. But that's not why I got back into it. The movies, I saw them, I enjoyed them, but I never considered coming back to the hobby when I was away, coming back to the hobby because of the latest Avengers movie or Marvel movie or whatever it was. What brought me back to the hobby was actually watching comic book men. Now, why is that? Well, in the Marvel movies, you see the Marvel characters up on screen. You see Captain America come to life. You see Iron Man come to life. You see the X-Men come to life, Spider-Man, and so forth. But with that show, Comic Book Men, I actually got a chance to see the comics. Because for me, as I'm sure most of you, or a lot of you, I was a comic book fan and I was attracted to the artwork and the stories and all of that. So in Comic Book Men, when people would come up and bring a book they wanted to sell or whatever the situation was on that show, I was seeing the comics again, and it started to reignite that flame within me to say, hey, I used to enjoy collecting those. I used to enjoy going to the shows and all of that and seeing the comics on the wall and going through the long boxes back, way back in the day when I used to enjoy going through long boxes. I haven't enjoyed that in many years. But I can understand why people enjoy doing that, because I used to enjoy doing that. So seeing the real comic book again on screen really started to reignite that interest that I had in a hobby that I stopped collecting for many years earlier. So it was around 2013 that I started to get back into the hobby, and in 2014 I was full-blown back in. So when I stopped collecting many years before that, I had a short list in my head of books that I wanted to get that I just never got around to because I stopped collecting due to life issues or just life in general. Not necessarily life issues, but just life in general. People get married, people go off to school, people start relationships, people start working, they forget about some of the things that were important to them many years ago. And comic books was one of those things for me. Still had them, still liked them, but didn't really think twice about collecting them. It wasn't until Comic Book Men. So when I came back, I remembered that short list of books that I wanted to get. And I created another list as I was going along, of course. But on that short list of books was some of these books right here. And I'll talk to you about them as I show them. Yes, the first appearance of Bullseye in Daredevil 131. This was a book that I wanted to get way back when I first started collecting, and it was just one of those things that I never got around to. So when I came back, I said to myself, "Oh, now's my chance. Now's my time to get Daredevil 131." And this was one of the first books that I bought. I went to my first comic book convention in many years in 2014, and I wanted to pick this up. I didn't pick it up at the con, but I saw several copies of it that I was interested in buying. I would buy it soon after the con. But this book is pretty important for me when I came back to the hobby for all those reasons I mentioned. Another Very, very important book that I wanted to get that I wasn't able to get when I first started collecting because of price, was this one right here, X-Men 94. First time the new X-Men come, the series starts up again and they have the new X-Men in the title. I told the story in 2001, a couple of years after eBay started. I was discovering that you could buy comics off of eBay. Wow, you could buy all these other things. You could also buy comic books. And I previously won X-Men 94 for I think about $120. I could not tell you what the grade was. It was probably like a 5 or something like that. I don't think it was anything that spectacular. But I decided, you know what? Screw it. I don't want to get it. And that was the reason why I was kicked off of eBay, because of the non-payment. And then later I created a new profile, which is the one I've had ever since then. But I got kicked off of eBay because of X-Men 94. But the point of the story is that 2001 was a couple years after I stopped collecting. When I started to dabble on eBay, I was like, oh, I used to collect comic books, and X-Men 94 was really important to me, and I tried to get it. Well, obviously it wasn't that important at that time because I didn't pay for it, but when I came back, that was definitely one of the first books I wanted, and one of the first books I got, along with Daredevil 131. Now, here's another one, Incredible Hulk 181. I had Incredible Hulk 181. I had my raw copy. I told you the story of how I got it. It was missing the Marvel stamp. It was a subscription issue, all that. So when I came back to the hobby, I said, I wanted to get better copies of certain books. Now, I'm not going to show every book here that was on my short list or every book that I upgraded when I came back to the hobby. I just selected a few here that I wanted to talk more in detail about. And Incredible Hulk 181 was one of them. Because, it always bothered me that the Marvel stamp was missing and that whole story about that. So I said I wanted to get a better copy of Incredible Hulk 181. And I wound up getting this copy here. And even back then, when I started learning about CGC, I said to myself, this looks a lot better than a 6.0. And I was thinking about resubmitting it and all that. And then obviously I never got around to it, but who knows? Maybe one day. But Incredible Hulk 181 has been in my collection since I started collecting. A copy of it, at least. And, I wanted to, when I came back, I was determined to get a nicer copy. And the 6.0 is definitely a nicer copy than the one I had, in many ways. And that is the same for this next book. I had a really rough copy. It was probably a 3.0, so it's not really rough. In hindsight, I think it was a 3.0. If it were pressed, it might have gone up to a 3.5. But anyway, I wanted to get something better than that. So I did, and I got this. Giant size X-Men, a 6.5. I think with a press and a cleaning, it should probably go up to a 7. But again, it was another book that I wanted to upgrade when I came back to the hobby. I thought that, hey, I'm a big X-Men fan. Let's try to do a little bit better. And along the way, within the next few months, I upgraded a couple other books that I had since I first started collecting when it comes to X-Men that I upgraded. I'm not going to show them all, but those are the two that I wanted to show. Now, the last 3 here are books that I've never owned. The first 2, Daredevil and X-Men 94, were examples of books I never owned, but I really, really wanted. When I came back to the hobby, there were other books that I toyed around with getting a couple years earlier. Not when I first started collecting, but a couple years earlier, like in 2010, 2011, that I just never got around to, obviously. And one of them was this. Tomb of Dracula, number 10, first appearance of Blade. I said, I'd like to get the first appearance of Blade. Again, this is a book, character that I knew about when I first started collecting, but just like Luke Cage, like Iron Fist, I just never got around to it. I was too busy collecting for X-Men. I was too busy collecting for Spider-Man. So for me to start branching out and collecting other things due to limited amount of money, it just didn't make too much sense for me. But when I came back, I said I definitely want to get it, first appearance of Blade. And I wound up getting a nice copy. Again, now, here's another one. This is a book that I didn't plan on getting, like I said, I thought back in 2010, 2011, I'd like to get the first appearance of Blade, and then I eventually did in 2014, several years later. But I never had this, it was never the same for this one. When I came back to the hobby in 2014, I started to look into Batman. How am I supposed to get the first appearance of some of these Batman villains, like the Penguin and Clayface and the Riddler? It's just going to be hard. But I started thinking about it, and I said, well, which one do I think I can get that's not ridiculously overpriced, that I like, that is pretty well known? And I went with this one. Batman 232, the awesome cover by Neil Adams, the first appearance of Ra's al Ghul. I remember Ra's al Ghul from the Batman the Animated Series that came out in 92. I don't know if he showed up in 92 or 93, but that's what I remember Ra's al Ghul. Like I said, I collected comics in 93, 94, 95, 96, all those years. I heard of Ra's al Ghul through the Animated Series because I didn't really collect Batman. I didn't know anything about Batman. I collected a couple issues that came out at that time, like Nightfall. I knew of Bane, and of course I knew of the older characters like the Joker and the Penguin, Two-Face and all that. But I never even heard of Ra's al Ghul until I watched the show, because I wasn't that much of a fan. But that's when I started to appreciate him through the show. And then when I came back, I said, well, after much debate about getting into Batman to begin with, I did, and I got that one. Last one. Here's one, again, when I came back to the hobby I wanted to get. When I first started collecting, I never even thought about getting this one. But this was something since I liked horror comics. And believe it or not, I wasn't even thinking about collecting EC when I came back. This is not an EC book. But I remember the movie from the 80s, and I enjoyed the movie. And when I found out it was a comic book character, I think probably in the early 90s, I was like, oh, wow, really? Oh, that's interesting. And I haven't given it much thought after that. But then when I came back to the hobby, I said, that's a great cover. I'd like to get that. And I saw it on Comic Book Man. Some guy brought it in a copy that he wanted to sell the guys. The guys didn't buy it from him because he had a little too much sentimental value. He put a little too much sentimental value on it. But I said, I'd like to get that. And when the opportunity arose for me to do so, I did. House of Secrets 92, first appearance of Swamp Thing. I don't think anybody can argue that this is not a good cover. It's a great cover. It's a memorable cover. It's a beautiful cover by the late, great Bernie Wrightson. And here you see Swamp Thing sneaking up behind Louise Simonson, the model for this this character here. It's really cool that Wrightson used Louise Simonson, and we all know who Louise Simonson is. I've met her, and she's very friendly, very, very nice, and it's just nice to meet somebody that was immortalized on a classic cover. An absolutely classic cover. So those are just some. There were plenty that I had on a short list in my mind. There were plenty that I wanted to upgrade and did upgrade, and there are plenty that I never thought about getting that I got when I came back to the hobby. And these are just some of the ones that stick out for me among others. So, in the comments, those of you that may have been away from the hobby, what brought you back to the hobby? I know this was like a similar video I did a while ago, but it doesn't matter. When you came back to the hobby, what were some books on your short list that you wanted to get that you did not get when you left the hobby? Or what are some books that you never thought you would get? For whatever reason, whether it was because of price or whether it was because you never even knew what the character, never knew about the character, never knew anything about the story. What are some of those books that you wound up getting when you came back to the hobby? Be interested to read and find out. Thank you all for watching. Take care, everyone.